So I've already said that the sketch filter in most situations is probably going to be enough. Usually that covers up the identities. Certainly anyway, it's like I said, it's become something of a standard, so you see it a lot at conferences and things now, when people do need to anonymize the identities of their participants. But there is a more precise form of anonymization, and much like the precise form of audio anonymization, it's a little bit fiddlier because you actually have to go in and work on specific segments of the track. And so this is what you would use if you wanted to anonymize a part of the screen. So for example, if you had recorded some data in a particular institution, say, and you wanted to block out a part of and there was a logo or something, or a name tag or something like that within view, and you wanted to block that out, you could use that to do this. You could also use this to block out somebody's face if you didn't want people to be able to identify them at all. I mean, the sketch filter does a decent job, but if you really wanted to block somebody's face, you could use this other filter that I'm going to be showing here. And this can be used in conjunction with the sketch filter or on its own. I'll use it without the sketch filter to start with, so I'll untick the sketch filter there, and I will move on to show you this other filter, which is called the mask filter. And actually the mask filter, the way that you apply it, there are two components to it. So the first one that you need is mask simple shape. So click on that one. Okay, we've got mask simple shape. And the second one that you need is, oh, I've scrolled past mask, is mask apply. So left click on that one. Okay, and now the way that this works is that anything that goes in between these two, so you'll notice that just adding those two, that hasn't done anything. But anything that you put in between these two will mask wherever the mask happens to be on screen. And just to illustrate what I mean by that, because it's a little bit confusing in the abstract, let's see if I can find the one that I'm looking for here. I'm just looking through to see if I can find a good one. Invert colors. This is one I've seen used before, and it illustrates the point quite well. So invert colors, and you'll see because the invert colors is not between the mask filters, it just applies to the whole video. However, if we drag it up in between the mask filters like so, okay, yeah, you'll see that, so the mask filter by default it will start in the middle, and you can see, yeah, it is now masking that part of the screen, except it's not really, because the invert colors isn't much of a masking tool. So in fact I'm going to just remove that one. That's just to illustrate the point. But if you really want to mask something on screen, I would say, let me just remove this actually, I would say there are two options. I mean, you could use a lot of these actually, but there are two standard options. First of all, there's Mosaic, and I'll just tick this one first of all, and you'll see that it's applied the Mosaic to the whole screen. And there is also Blur. So I'll just untick those for now. So let's start with Mosaic. And Mosaic is the one that I would recommend, incidentally. So we'll go Mosaic, put it in the middle there. And if I apply this, you'll see it's actually blurred out my hand. It's made my hand look like some sort of criminal, which I don't think is very nice, but okay. So the mask filter has now been applied, but you'll notice, of course, it's just sitting there in the middle of the screen, and it's not doing anything. Unless there was something in the middle of the screen, it's not really doing anything at this point. So what we need to do is we need to click on mask simple shape, and what we need to do is we need to move this to cover whatever it is we need to be covered. And in this case, I'm going to say that, unfortunately, I'm sorry, Charles, but I'm going to anonymize your face. So I'm interviewing a witness or something here. That is the fiction that I'm establishing for the purposes of this video. I'm interviewing a witness, and I don't want the witness to be identifiable. Now, unfortunately, we can't just drag and drop. It would be great if you could just drag and drop the mask and put it wherever you wanted to put it. And hopefully they will add that in a future update. But for now, we have to make do with these controls here. So what we have to do, as you can see, there's a horizontal and there's a vertical. So if I were to go left with the horizontal, it goes like so, and go left with the vertical goes up, go right with the vertical goes down. But it starts there in the middle as a default. But if we want to get it onto Charles's face, we need to go right on the horizontal, like that. and we want to go up slightly on the vertical, and okay, so that's in roughly the right position, but the shape is wrong. It's a bit too wide, but it's not tall enough. So we move on to these settings here, and we can reduce the width. I don't think we need much width, so about that should do the trick, I think. And then we can boost the height like so, and that seems to be pretty well obscured to me. So that is the Mosaic one, and that is the one that I would suggest that you use. I mean, again, you could go through that big list of video filters and experiment with different things there, but these are the two classic ones anyway. These are the two that you would recognize from programs about police busting down doors and so on. But let's just try the blur one just to show it. So I'll untick the Mosaic. There's Charles's face again, and okay, let's put the blur one on. And you'll notice the blur one, it's done it slightly, but the blur one by default doesn't do much. You actually have to add a slight blur and a slight blur. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I prefer the Mosaic one. I think the Mosaic one is far more effective, and the blur one just doesn't look right to me. I think it almost makes you feel as though the problem is in your eyes or something. So I'm going to go with the Mosaic one, but feel free to use whatever you want. So there we go. But there is a problem here, and this is a problem that you would have in your data if, for example, you had participants who were moving around, which of course participants tend to do. So what do we do? So let me first of all show how this problem comes up in this video. So let me just play the video here.
These questions really just cover.
And I'll skip forward just a little bit. Let's go. Okay, let's go. So the camera angle is about to shift.
Yes.
Yeah, and you'll notice the camera angle shifts, and the mask rather, shifts to the right, and actually obscures the cover of the esteemed journal Research on Language and Social Interaction. Well, we can't be having that, can we? So what's happened here? Well, there's been a camera angle shift, and of course the mask hasn't shifted position, but the camera angle has, and because of course Shotcut doesn't know that there's been an edit point there's been a shift in camera angle, it's kept it in the same place. So how do we do this? And of course in your data it's more likely to be, in real life data, it's more likely to be somebody moving around rather than a camera angle shift. But it's the same basic problem, is that when Shotcut doesn't know what's happening in the image, it only knows the frame, the parameters of the frame that you're using. So what do we do to fix this? Well, what we need to do is we need to split the video, and we're going to be talking a lot about splitting the video in the next video. But what we need to do is actually, first of all, we need to find the point at which the angle shifts. Very, very important to be precise, I think, when you're talking about something as important as anonymization. So the angle shifts there. So what we need to do down here in the track is we need to split the video so that in this chunk here, the mask is in the right place, which is covering Charles's face, and in the other chunk here, we're going to move it across to cover Charles's face. So I'm going to right-click, and you'll see that you can do this by pressing S, but I'll do it using this drop-down menu here because there's a visual indication of what I'm doing. So left-click on Split at Playhead. Okay, and so this chunk, all the settings that are applied to this chunk still apply, but we can now change the settings on this chunk without them affecting this chunk. And what we need to do, of course, is to bring this over again. And so we go back to Mask Simple Shape, and we go back along the horizontal like so. In fact, on this angle, you probably would need to fiddle with it a little bit more just to make it slightly taller, maybe. No, and a bit more width to it, just to fully, yeah. So, and that is how you would do it. So when the angle shifts back again, or if Charles were to shift in his seat, I don't think he does much of that in this interview, but if he were to shift in his seat, for example, and his head was suddenly here, you would need to manually detect the point at which that occurred, and then apply, fix the position of the mask over here. So as you can imagine, this is quite fiddly work, much more so, I would say, than anonymizing a search. See, here we have a different angle, and it's come back to the center. And I could, of course, in fact, I'll just do one more just to really illustrate the point. So here I go back across. Where is it? Where does the edit point happen? Come on. Oh, I've gone down. The edit point happens somewhere around here, surely. Let me just find it. Okay, so it probably happens... This is, incidentally, to move the frames here, I'm just tapping on my arrow keys. So I'm tapping the right arrow key here just to move it frame by frame. Okay, so it happens there, so we'd apply another split. Obviously you don't need to do this in the audio track because the audio track doesn't have any visual in it. So we're back here, and now in this section, so again the red line, the red outline, very, very important. In this section we've got the mask back in the center, because that in that angle the mask is in the center, but in this one we need to move it back as we did in the first one. So we're going to, what am I doing? I'm doing it on the wrong one, aren't I? We need to give it more on the horizontal, and yeah, once again it's too wide, so we would we'd bring the width in a little bit about there, and we could fiddle with the height. So, as I was saying, that, as you can tell, that's going to be very, very fiddly work. It may be necessary in certain situations. Hopefully you've got a single camera setup, and the thing that you need to obscure is just something that stays in the same position on the screen throughout the video, in which case this would be a doddle. If you do have things, if the thing that you need to obscure happens to be moving around the screen a lot, obviously you're going to have a lot of edit points, and you're going to have to redo the position of the mask every single time. So very, very fiddly work, but you may have to do it at some point. And my recommendation would be, incidentally, once you've done applying the mask filter to every single position it needs to be in, I would recommend just exporting your video and then re-importing it back into Shotcut, because what you're going to have then are lots and lots of little edit points along the video track here, and they could get in the way, or they could just be plain unwieldy, frankly. So I would recommend going to export once you've done all of the masking that you need to do. Go into export, go to YouTube, export the file, and then just drag it back into the file that the version of the video that you've exported back into this, and just work on it with the mask hard encoded into the video, rather than having all these little edit points along the timeline, which could get quite unwieldy. Okay, so that's how we do video anonymization. Then I will see you in the next video, where we're going to be talking about editing video and making clips. Bye bye for now.